My last book, my second book, first novel, very first one was a collection of short stories, but it's called Rebirth, and it's about a young woman based in Bangalore, struggling in her marriage and the life she finds through that struggle. It's basically the struggles women go through in our cities today, in urban situations. Very different from before, where we had support of large families, parents, communities. Nowadays, I find a lot of young women, especially in an urban situation, live very alone, live very isolated lives, especially if they don't work, especially if they're in flats and their husbands go to work. Very often they don't know their neighbors, very often they're from different parts of the country, do not have good friends in the city, and that sense of isolation can be a very dangerous thing. Can undermine your very self, which is what happens to the protagonist in this book. In the end, she is expecting a child and she is going through difficulty in her personal life, and she ends up talking to the unborn child. That is the crux of the book. And that talking to the child somehow sharpens the sense of, for the reader, I feel, the isolation that she has no one else to talk to, and she's reduced to talking to a child, which many women do. It's a happy thing in a pregnancy, you talk to your child, but here she is doing it as a last resort, as a last-ditch friendship. She's talking to a child about her life. And I've actually been here a very long time. I first came here over 20 years ago, so I'm not really new to Bangalore. It's almost second home, adopted second hometown. And yes, in the recent past, in the last 10 years, a whole lot of people have come from the northeast and many other parts of the country to Bangalore, seeking work and a place to live. And I do find that what is happening now is very different from what happened in my time, where the city was still a gentler city. The localities were still more cohesive. You still had neighbors and friends in your local corner shop. Now in the more outlying areas of Bangalore, or also in the central areas where increasingly more flats are being built, there is a sense of isolation. There's a sense of loss of community, I feel. And what else do we have but community to replace our families back home? And if we lose that community feeling, it could be a very dangerous thing, like it is for this young woman in the book. She's from Assam, and a lot of people ask me if that was my story. It's not. The only thing we share is the love of plants and birds, and the fact that we come from Assam. She's a very different person from me, but she also is a woman who, by virtue of being from where she is a fairly calm, subdued sort of person, not used to being very demonstrative or expressive, yet not used to reacting, because that is what we react slowly in the Northeast. But here she finds herself thrown into sort of deep waters, where she's forced to sort out her own feelings, not only about what's happening now, but things she had buried away in her past. So she has to come up and confront herself and her life to be able to get out of the situation she is in now. Not really. One has friends and family, and one is in touch with the younger people. But to build such a character, not really, because this is an age-old situation for women. We have a very different set of conflicts and problems from men, I would say, although that's too sharp a divide. But yes, she deals with problems which are age-old and yet new, and how she deals with them is, her journey is what I'm talking about in the book, really. She's married to, it was an arranged marriage, again from Assam, and which is her central problem, really, the marriage. There was a panel yesterday about talking from a city voices, and an interesting thing here is that she's based in a part of town which I lived in for a long time, Richmond town in Bangalore. So there is a lot of Bangalore in the city, and also a sense of how a city can influence a writer, here how it influenced me, and also how a city influences people who live in it, how it's influencing her very subtly, insidiously, how it's changing her very perspective on life. It's what we call a sense of place in writing, and very often I've been told, and I do realize it myself, that my writing has a great sense of place, a deep sense of place. A lot of my writing is based in Assam, from Assam, although I haven't lived there really over 20 years now. And increasingly I find it's a lot of Bangalore coming into my fiction. So I think I'm one of those writers who write with a sense of place, and it's important. It's important to, I think, root yourself in a city somewhere. When you talk, in realist fiction, the kind of fiction I write, because people sort of understand straight away. They understand a Bombay, they understand a Delhi, and they understand the person who comes from that. So why not a Bangalore and Assam? And in a way, it's not meant to be a travel book. Fiction is never about educating people, but it's in a way to open people's minds and hearts to certain places that they've not been to. My background is very mixed. My father was in the civil services, so I've been across the country and across the world. So have lived in many more places more than Assam. I've probably lived more than half my life away from Assam than in Assam actually. And yes, Assam has smaller cities. The capital city is small, Guwahati, on the banks of the river Brahmaputra. But when I came to Bangalore, it certainly was a different place from what it is now. It was a very gentle, welcoming city. And when we had the situation with the Northeast Exodus a couple of years ago, and I felt really sad somewhere, because this was a city which had welcomed me with open arms, didn't ask questions about where you're from, didn't judge, just embraced you so openly. And to think that in the same city, people have to flee from it because they feel insecure was somewhere very sad for me. And I have great faith in the city. I still feel that probably was a hiccup, that particular problem, and the city will still embrace with open arms.